Tatsuki Fujimoto is a name that should be quite familiar to anyone in the manga scene. His iconic and compelling original ideas for stories, impactful characters, memorable paneling, and absolutely, at times, shocking moments throughout. His work has been fairly recent, and he's easily most well known for his creation of Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man is a fun and encapsulating shonen, no doubt, and while the fans are a whole other thing to get into, it's a great time. His only other full-length manga is the balls-to-the-wall, over-the-top Fire Punch. I can't stress enough just how insane Fire Punch is, and it's really a story you have to experience yourself to even have the slightest grasp of. Fujimoto has also created an abundance of one-shots, such as the heartbreaking and explosive Goodbye Eri, or the most recently adapted Look Back. His work is unique and original, and while original doesn't always equal good, for the most part, Fujimoto's on the right track. With that little introduction out of the way, let's get right to the point. What is the best Fujimoto work? To go about this, instead of just giving you the opinion of my summaries of these stories, we're going to get a little more in depth. If you're here to listen about character development, creative paneling, and motives for antagonists, all while capturing and breaking down the most tense and suspicious moments of each work, then stick around, you're in for a treat. Some things I do want to clarify before starting though. With Fujimoto only having 2 full-length mangas at the time, I'm going to dive deepest into those 2, compared to his one-shots. It isn't that his one-shots don't have depth, trust me, we'll get plenty of it. It's just that simply, there isn't as much material compared to Chainsaw Man or Fire Punch. I will, however, see fit to bring comparisons of theming and elements to light with each manga that shares them. With all that said, let's get started. Goodbye Eri is tough. Not that it puts up a tough front or is difficult to get through. It's heartbreaking, and yet it's extremely optimistic in its storytelling and pacing. Goodbye Eri follows the story of a young boy named Yuma, who documents his life through his new cell phone. We're made aware that his mother is suffering from some serious illness that inevitably will kill her. Yuta records everything, and we see that his mother and father really love him. He creates a film with the tape he has, and while most of his class hates it, there's one who finds it interesting. Eri, the girl in question, then teams up with Yuta, as they work to create an even better film that will blow the previous out of the water. A simple story on its front, and it's presented to be a heartwarming tale of 2 outcasts as they bond over a shared love of film. I won't spoil the entire manga, but as the story continues, the cruel reality of the world strikes against both Yuta and Eri, and despite the struggle they're put through, they pursue in their movie endeavors against all odds. Fujimoto is an expert panelist, and that talented craft is in abundance with this one-shot. The POV shots we get from the camera's grainy and slightly blurry screen really put us into this world. The world of innocence, imagination, and creativity from 2 middle schoolers. While we're aware of the tribulations that are set upon these children, it doesn't slow them down at all. It allows us, for just a bit, to see through the eyes of dream-driven children. The main character of Yuta is pretty well done in my opinion. He starts the story almost oblivious to everything around him. He can't fully fathom why people would hate his film, and he can't get a grasp on different perspectives. It's thanks to Eri, the second main character, to show that to him. She introduces him to a whole new world, and at the same time, Yuta makes it a mission to create a film for her, one that's all about himself, perfecting it to a point to make the audience bawl their eyes out. Looking towards how the story ends, it's clear that Fujimoto intended to get the readers to think critically on what happens. However, I think the process in which he laid out the story and its timeline are genius. Goodbye Eri is very real, and it may very well be my favorite one-shot of his. However, I say it may be, as this next one is fighting for my favorite one-shot. The recently adapted Look Back is a sweet story at its heart. But this is a Fujimoto work, so it can't just simply be a fun and heartwarming story without some massive tragedy being involved. We're going to see a lot of that coming up later. Look Back starts with the main character Fujino, a middle schooler who loves drawing manga for her class newspaper. It's a hobby she's passionate about, until a shut-in student named Kyomoto starts drawing as well, and ups her in her art respectively. While she initially is put off from ever drawing again, she decides that she and Kyomoto could work together in creating their own manga. The 2 would start to spend time together, crafting their work in a perfection and creativity that only middle schoolers could create. Eventually, their work gets published, and the 2 girls find themselves at split ends, as one of them wants to continue manga, while the other attends art school. The rest of the story follows what I would say new perspectives. It tells tales of the two fates in different scenarios, of what did happen, what could have happened, and what should have happened. It's a heartbreaking, to say the least, and Fujimoto is once again able to craft such an intense narrative and fully fledged characters in such a short work. The main character Fujino starts the story confident and passionate. She would eventually become deterred and cynical in her passion, but it's thanks to Kimoto that she finds that spark. The two girls complement each other and allow each other to grow. At the beginning of the story, Kimoto admits that she was inspired by Fujino's work, and it pushed her to create her own art. And in full circle, by the end of the manga, Fujino is inspired by Kimoto to continue her life, and live and create for not only her, but herself. If the stylization wasn't already perfect enough in its manga form, the newly released look-back film will do it for you. The film captures Fujimoto's art style immaculately, all the while being more impactful on the screen. These next stories don't have too much substance to them, so I'll gloss over them fairly quickly. Firstly, Sasaki Stopped a Bullet is a small one-shot story about a young boy who is so fond of his teacher, he thinks she must be a god. When a man enters the classroom and threatens to shoot the teacher, Sasaki confronts the man and, well, catches the bullet shot at him with his own hands, with no damage done to him whatsoever. The story is really about the power of belief, and how nothing can ever have a true 0% chance of happening. However, with Fujimoto, he uses this idea and pushes it to an exaggerated level. There are two chickens in the garden. It's a one-shot about two humans who disguise themselves as chickens to hide from a world overrun by aliens. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous sounding, but this is a Fujimoto work we're talking about. The story starts out as a comedic bit, as we get to see the culture and lifestyle of the aliens. Yet surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly considering the author, the story has some heartfelt moments to it, and in the end, it's even a bit touching, despite how odd it really is. Just Listen to the Song is about a young man who professes his love to his crush, and he sends her a YouTube video he made for her in the form of a song he wrote. However, the song blows up all across the world, but for all the wrong reasons. The young man feels heavy expectations to follow up, as his next video has to satisfy the audience he's procured. This one-shot is very straight at the point, just as many of his other small ones have been, but the theme of being true to yourself despite what the world expects of you is simply nice. Mermaid Rhapsody follows a young boy whose mother was a mermaid, and therefore has become fond of the ocean. While mermaids are considered dangerous, as they sometimes eat humans, that doesn't stop him from playing an abandoned piano at the bottom of the ocean. He starts to attract a curious mermaid who agrees to teach her piano in exchange for food and company. While this one-shot has some themes of overcoming instinct and willpower to becoming accepting, it's overall just a short, cute one-shot that makes you feel good after reading it. I will say, the art in this one-shot is probably the best out of all the short one-shots of Fujimoto. Great stuff here. Shikaku is an interesting one. It's about a young woman named Shikaku, who is a world-famous hitman. Her next job is hired by a vampire who orders her to kill him, in which she continues to try with no success. The artwork is also really good in this one, and there's some sick paneling we get with just how gory and violent this one-shot really is. I Woke Up as a Girl Disease is a small one-shot about identity problems and what it takes to truly be a man or woman. I found this story somewhat of a reflection of elements of Fire Punch, considering that if you've read Fire Punch, you know all about Togata's character and what her crisis entails. Which makes sense, considering this one-shot was written during Fire Punch's chapter releases. This one-shot is a nice one, but I found it to be one where Fujimoto tried new ideas, specifically with identity, but didn't have it fully fleshed out yet. Love is Blind is a story about a boy who plans to confess to his crush, but everything in the world seems to try and stop him from doing so. It starts off pretty minor, with his teacher telling him he needs to stay after school, but it actually gets hilariously ridiculous with the amount of inconveniences that pop up. If you're looking for a short and comedic one-shot, I'd recommend this. People don't often talk about how good Fujimoto is at comedy in his work, but I think this one-shot is a good reminder of that. Little Sister, Elder Sister is about a girl and her younger sister, who both attend art school. The main character is humiliated after her younger sister paints a nude portrait of her and displays it in the school. This one's a bit weird, but I can understand why Fujimoto is doing this. It's supposed to be a theme of family coming first, and the admiration siblings have for each other, especially when you're young, even if it's done in a suspicious way. Finally, there's Nayuta of the Prophecy. This one-shot centers around a supposed devil child named Nayuta, who is prophesied to end the world. Her older brother Kenji does everything he can to keep her out of trouble, despite just how hard it really is. He finds that no matter how difficult it is, and even with hundreds of people demeaning her, he stands up for her because he's her brother after all, and their family. I believe this is one of the more recent short one-shots from Fujimoto, and I think anyone who's a fan of his should check this one out. However, let's get into the real big stuff here. Fujimoto's 2 fully published manga series. While many are aware of the huge phenomenon that Chainsaw Man has been, I want to instead start with his first series, Fire Punch. Fire Punch may just be the most original manga series of all time. The ideas Fujimoto brings to the table are absolutely ridiculous, and in all the best ways. Now, I've already made a video on my channel about Fire Punch, so I'm not going to go too in-depth with it here. However, if you're interested in hearing a more in-depth perception of Fire Punch and its villains, you can check it out. The premise of Fire Punch can actually be simplified down to a single sentence. A man seeks revenge on the one who killed his sister and set his body ablaze for all of eternity. A simple enough concept, right? Yeah, I know, this story is seriously the most balls-to-the-wall thing I've ever read, and it's still peak. Fujimoto uses his paneling in this series excellently, being able to build tension and suspense with blacked-out panels just before a big drop, having a dual panel shot of a hero and a villain, and of course, full page spreads to absolutely enhance the experience and power behind the panel. This might be a bit of a hot take, but I think Fujimoto's art is the best in Fire Punch. Fujimoto is well known for his gritty, rough yet recognizable style of drawing humans, and I think he captures true despair, apathy, and resilience in this work. Just look at this panel. I know it's a big meme now, but the painful smile of agony is seriously heartbreaking to see, and it's because of how well Fujimoto crafts the human face and emotion. Speaking of Agni, let's talk about him real quick. Agni is an extremely interesting protagonist. He first of all is an unreliable narrator. We see constant back and forth panels of Agni battling with his broken mental state, and in turn, we as the readers are subject to his unreliability. However, because of this, we are just as shocked at the things Agni does as he is himself. Due to his ongoing mental battle, and consequently his Fire Punch persona, Agni is at grips with himself, always struggling to stay alive until he hears that one word: live. What Fire Punch is actually about is the struggle of hopelessness. Living in a world that reeks of nihilism, one must learn to find a reason to live, even when everything around you encourages you otherwise. Also, before we move on, this story does primarily focus on Agni, but Togata is an incredible character as well. She suffers from her own nihilistic tendencies just as Agni, although hers is under the struggles of self-identity. I've never read any manga with a character like hers, and really, not any like Agni either. However, we have one last big work to talk about before we finish. Chainsaw Man was, and still is, a phenomenon that blew Fujimoto to stardom, seemingly overnight. I probably don't need to explain to you what Chainsaw Man is on a Fujimoto video, so I'll try to make this fairly brief. Denji is a young man who seems to have lost everything, and in a world full of devils and the hunters who follow suit, Denji takes up the offer to kill some for money. But surprise, surprise, he ends up becoming one himself, at least partially. Chainsaw Man is extremely captivating, especially in its first half. This manga is full of recognizable and iconic characters already in the manga world. Aki is a stoic young hunter, but full of a deepened past and hidden trauma. A man who seemingly takes so many risks and flies off into danger as if he doesn't care for his own well-being. Power is a devil hybrid, who is extremely prone to action and anger, but just as well learns to open up and trust others. This manga is also just fun to read, with so many other cool characters like Beam, Kobeni, Kishibe, Angel, Violence, Katana Man, There's so many. However, despite how fun this series can be, it is equally just as dark and gritty when it needs to be. The best examples of this duality are the Hell arc and the Gun Devil arc. For the majority of the first half of the story, it's relatively well paced and fairly lighthearted. There is tension, of course, such as who or what Makima really is, or what the Gun Devil is capable of, and the mystery of Denji's past. But it's always accompanied through the main three characters, usually who are involved together, especially Power and Denji, as their antics sometimes get the best of them. The Hell arc, though, is where the tone majorly shifts for the rest of the manga. First off, the paneling is absolutely incredible and creative for this segment of the story. The fingers that literally come out of the manga panel lining, as well as the giant hand that teleports the crew to Hell, is extremely unique. It feels as if the very book itself is trying to take you with it, as it breaks away from the boxes that shape the panels, and therefore, the story. And then there's the design of Hell. It's a very interesting concept. Hell here isn't full of fires, not full of other demons or devils. It's an endless meadow with thousands of doors to make a ceiling. Fujimoto excellently makes the reader feel a sense of isolation and the fear of the infinite and the dread that comes with it. The introduction of the Darkness Devil, then, only encapsulates that fear tenfold. A monstrous being with no sense of reason, that only exists to strike a primal fear into anyone who encounters it. Then we have the Gun Devil introduction. This entire section is full of wondrous and terrifying panels. The introduction of what its powers do, and the long list of names, as if you're reading a live and updating obituary. I've never seen this done in manga before, and it left me utterly breathless when I first read it. Still today, I'm affected just as heavily whenever I read this part of the story. While I said that Fujimoto's art was the best in Fire Punch, I do think his paneling is best done here. Chainsaw Man just has too many good shots, most as if he writes the stories as if they were movies. I wonder if Fujimoto has ever made any connections or usage of movies and theater in any of his stories. Yeah, I really wonder. Anyway, that covers my thoughts on all of his main works. Now, I understand that I may not have read everything he's done, but a lot of his small one-shots are really hard to find proper translated scans of online, so I did the best I could with what I found. So now, for the end of the video, I thought I'd rank all his works from my least favorite to favorite. And just to clarify, I don't think my favorite of his necessarily means it's his best. This is just how much enjoyment and overall experience I got from reading each of these. For last place, and number 13, I have Little Sister's Elder Sister. This one just was a little bit too weird for me, even from a Fujimoto work, and a little uncomfortable to read in certain parts. Not the worst thing ever, but not one I particularly enjoyed. Number 12 is When I Woke Up, I Became a Girl Disease. Man, I feel really weird saying these titles out loud. This one has a pretty nice theme behind it with the struggles of self-identity, but like I said before, I think Fire Punch just did a way better job at this. Number 11 is Sasaki Stopped a Bullet. I just don't find much happening in this story, and while the initial moment of the bullet being grabbed is pretty sick, that's about the only highlight I can think of here. Number 10 is Shikaku. This is the part of the list where I started to really enjoy these one-shots in manga, and Shikaku is a really cool premise of a story. I love how graphic this one-shot gets, and the innocent persona Shikaku gives off makes for a great payoff when we see just how violent she gets. Number 9 is Nayuta of the Prophecy. I know most people who have read this one-shot find it to be one of their favorites, and I understand why. It's a bit comedic, the art's great, and it's a good message. However, I just found the next ones coming up to get more done with its story in even fewer pages. Number 8 is There Are Two Chickens in the Garden. I know this story has such a ridiculous concept, but it was just so much fun to read, man. Sure, the art's a bit rough, and some may find the twist at the end to be annoying, but I think it served as a great mini-thriller from Fujimoto. Number 7 is Love is Blind. This is easily the most funny one-shot of Fujimoto's, and while the story is extremely simple, I found it to be hilarious to read. Now for these last 6 works I find to be extremely good, and these are easily the ones I recommend people to read. Number 6 is Mermaid Rhapsody. A sweet little tale about sticking together with a friend, despite others telling you how dangerous and bad it is, and in turn, also battling against animalistic nature for the greater good. Not to mention, there are just some fantastic panels in this one-shot. Number 5 is Just Listen to the Song. One of the shortest one-shots by Fujimoto, and also one of his best. The story of someone pouring their heart out for another, being at your most vulnerable, and gaining all the recognition and attention for all the wrong reasons. A great short read that I think all would enjoy. These last 4 were probably pretty obvious to be the top contenders, and at number 4 I have Look Back. An incredibly heartbreaking story of friendship through the years, growing up together and helping each other through the way, and at the very end, looking back at what was and what could have been. It's a sad read, but one that will truly make you feel something when you finish. And that something is depression, let's be real. Cracking the top 3 is Goodbye Eri. The best one-shot of Fujimoto, and to me, it's really no contest. From the start of this manga, we're introduced with a gripping concept, interesting paneling choices, as well as a non-linear story, and we're given a bombastic story throughout, as well as an explosive ending. Okay, I'm done with the puns. But Goodbye Eri is a must-read if you're a Fujimoto fan, and really a must-read for any manga fan. Therefore, number 2 is Chainsaw Man. While being his most popular work, and regarded as his best, Chainsaw Man sets the ground for what I think a dark shonen manga should strive for. It's fun, but has serious moments. Its characters are very well written, and feel like actual people. The fights are incredible, albeit a little messy at times, but that's just more of a product of Fujimoto's style, which, in many cases, I find the messy style to benefit. It has great paneling, and an absolutely wild ride of a story. And finally, my favorite Fujimoto work, Fire Punch, is number 1. I understand that not everyone's going to like this manga. It's very weird, and very confusing on a first read. And if you were one of these people who didn't like Fire Punch all that much, or couldn't really get into it, I implore you to try again, and allow yourself to be taken into the chaotic world that Fujimoto created with this manga. It's dark, chaotic, full of tension, and really is a full-on character study of a single person. No other manga of his truly focuses so much on one person. It focuses so much on the main character of Agni that you really get to explore and uncover him, just as much as he does with himself. Fire Punch is extremely original in its writing, and it really goes wild with the writing and decisions in the manga. It's the most quote-unquote Fujimoto work of all of his works, in my opinion. Truly a must-read for anybody who wants something new and exciting. And that about does it. What's your favorite Fujimoto work out of all of his, and what's your least favorite? Is it one of the short one-shots he's made, maybe one of the 2 big one-shots of Goodbye Eri or Look Back, or is Chainsaw Man or Fire Punch your favorite? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching, and have a great one.